Welcome to the Pineal podcast with myself, Nick Bell, and the ever-loving Björn Lens. How are you today, Björn?
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Now, I was pondering upon a topic for the day, and I thought to myself, one of the things I enjoy most about recording these podcasts with you is getting a little window into that magnificent mind of yours. And I think it's something that our viewers or listeners will also enjoy, or do also enjoy. So I want to change the format of what we're doing today. Usually what we do is we pick a topic and together we explore it and we play around with it and we see where we go. But what I'd like to do today is I'd like us to do something called random words. Now, this is where I say a word. I have 9 prepared. And when I say this word, the invitation for you, Björn, is to respond with what comes up in the moment. Now, it could be a definition of the word, probably the more boring kind of way of responding, right? Or it could be a definition of the word in context, in a certain context, which you think is relevant at this moment in time in our society or in time in your life. Or it could be that it points at some work that you're doing yourself or that you're doing with a client, and there's some insights that you want to share around that. So that's what I think would be a good way to proceed with this call. How does that feel for you?
Wonderful.
Super.
Like, who the fuck knows what happens?
Yes, let's just strap ourselves to the rocket and see where we go. Okay, so the first word is change.
Yeah, that's basically the word where the universe evolves around, and evolving is also just another term for change. Change is something that we're here for, in the sense of, like, if you look at what people say, that what we're here for is maybe to take interesting decisions or to enjoy our lives and all that, but it all goes back to change in some way, because whenever you're stuck with something, basically die, basically just there's no point in staying the same. There's nothing interesting for consciousness to realize or to experience without change. And one of the wonderful examples of our shared mentor, Peter Sage, is when you look at nature, you either grow or you die. And grow and change is basically exactly the same, except that grow has a direction.
So what would happen in your view if somebody combined that first word with the second word I'm going to give you, which is resistance?
Yes. Resisting is a gift. Resisting is the gift of telling you where something is relevant, where something interesting happens. Resistance is not something to fight, and not something that is telling you this is not the way to go. Resistance is exactly the pointer to where you need to go. And resistance to change is something that is very common, which is basically keeping us in our comfort zone and where we know ourselves, where we already have patterns in place to sustain our living. But patterns are exactly a way to get out of awareness, get out of consciousness, where you can live on autopilot, where you can basically be lived by ego structures and what the body already knows. So change is something that leads to awareness and more consciousness by breaking out of patterns. And resistance to change is exactly this, like, resistance to change is an interesting thing, because it is very deeply knit together with the belief of whenever something changes, it gets worse. Like there's a saying that I remember from my first internship at a huge corporation. It was in German, so let me see if I can master it in English. It's like, and they said, oh, cannot master it. Let's fuck it up. No, it's good. It's good. Not meant to be shared. So, resistance to change. I have dealt with many clients who basically, as children, have ingrained the belief that whenever a huge surprise comes, it's going to be bad. And the problem is, if you have that as an expectation, this is actually what happens. And therefore they resist change whenever they can, because change is always a step into the unknown. If change is not a step into the unknown, it's not a change. It's basically an unchange. It's basically a step back towards somewhere where you've already been, which I wouldn't consider change. And another saying, maybe this is willing to come out, is in order to get better, something has to change. But if something changes, that it then will be better, that is to be seen. And that is like the magic of change. Something is different. Something is inviting to different awarenesses. Something is inviting to grow. Something is inviting to look with fresh eyes. So from my point of view, any change is welcome. Sometimes it means I don't enjoy it because it's like, for example, if you're living in a relationship and you have a breakdown, you have a fight, and for a short moment, everything might be in jeopardy and you might question the whole relationship and all of that. And that's obviously a change that is not welcome in the moment, in the sense of course, we all enjoy harmony and therefore we do not want to go into breakdowns. But this is actually the moment for introspection. This is a moment where you can look inside and see what is causing this. What beliefs do I have that are causing this? What am I pointing myself to analyze? And then the real change can happen, because this is, now we're getting somewhere. This is what we're resisting towards, the change in the outside environment. But what we're really looking for is change of our inside environment, so that the so-called reality can unfold in a different way. And when we manage to look inside and see what's not serving us and change that, then everything can unfold in a more beautiful way. And then the change in the outside environment might be slow or steady, but always beneficial, always leading to something greater. So resistance to change in the outside environment doesn't look too smart, because the change in the outside environment will lead to new insights so that you can unfold yourself into your true self more effectively. Resistance to change in the inside environment is often an expression of fear, in the sense of fear of your own greatness.
And do you identify any areas in your life right now that you're resisting?
Yes. A few months ago already, maybe 2 months, not more, I was working together with a coach, and I was kind of stuck in the sense of I had great visions to earn a lot of money and all that. And he asked the deep questions in the sense, is this really what you're here for? And I realized, no, it's not. Like I'm very close to my connection with God. And therefore I'm here to co-create a tribe willing to receive themselves as God. And the first action of embracing that journey might be to create a manifest, a book, something substantiate, something where there's put effort into getting the wordings right, of getting clarity of what it is that is here to unfold. And I wrote 2 drafts of that book already. Not drafts in the sense of that the book is complete, but in the sense of there's a structure and there's an idea of what the storyline is basically. And on the last retreat, a lot of the structure that was already in place got pulled down, basically, in the sense of, like, in the sense of the story. I think it is in Think and Grow Rich, where somebody is to create a report of some kind, and he puts it on the desk of his superior, and he just gets it back with a note of saying, well, is that all you can do? And on the next day, he puts a lot of effort in. He works through the whole night. He completely rewrites everything. And the next day, he just gets it back with a note. I think there's more that you can do. And again, he completely goes over everything. And then on the third day, he actually hands the result to his superior. And he says, well, okay, then I'm going to read it, actually. And this is similar to the book. Like, yes, there's something wonderfully strong, intense that's wanting to be birthed through me. But in the next iteration, I know that there are parts that I'm just reluctant to share, in the sense of that I'm afraid of my own greatness, of that I question my ability to be able to write it, that I question my like, who gives me the right to say those things that I know are true and I know are ready to be said? And the answer is simple. I give myself the right to do it. And the book is just an invitation, and everybody who doesn't resonate, and that's perfectly fine. But the resistance to that is, like, there's always this question, am I resisting, or is it not the time yet? And usually the answer is not yes or no. The answer is not black and white. The point is, am I ready to write it completely in the next evening? Probably not. But when I resist the writing in going away from the book and distracting myself with other activities, then I'm just falling for the resistance, because the focus, the presence with the book is what drives us forward.
Thank you. Our next word. It's 2 words. Political correctness.
Beautiful. That brings me to a quote from the book, which is, triggering is a service, being triggered is a choice. But there's a little bit of depth to it. Like, there's malicious triggering and there's benevolent triggering. And political correctness basically is, from my point of view, social convention not to trigger. So it can be a restriction. It can hold people back. Like when there is something said, not in a malicious way, but in a way that is triggering, and there is the excuse that it isn't politically correct and therefore it's okay to be triggered, that is a pattern of running away. Because that just gives you the excuse of not exploring what is triggering you.
Very nice. I like how concise you were, because for a lot of people that probably would have resulted in a somewhat confusing 30-minute array of information. So
yeah, but like for me, political correctness is not a big thing. It's just a rule, or yeah, a rule that is just limiting expression. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have, like, there are many unconscious people out there, and that's fine. And for some of them, it's just helpful to have rules to align to and not to disturb whatever. And for them, political correctness might be a good guiding thing if they don't want to get into fights all the time, for example. But in the big picture, it's just a social convention rule. And I'm not saying social convention rules are bad. For example, we have the social convention rule that we do not pee in the streets. And that is very useful because otherwise it would stink and it would just be like not a nice environment to live in. And exactly in the same way, political correctness can be very beneficial. But when it's seen as a limitation or when you use it as an excuse not to explore yourself, that's just stupid. And like exactly like not peeing in the street as a social convention, it has its limits. It's more like a principle than a rule. For example, when well, my daughter is 4 now, so she has her peeing under control. But let's say, for example, 2 years ago when she was out of diapers, and when I'm in the city or something, and she says, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, I have to pee, and I have to pee really hard, and there's no store, no cafe that I see that I can go into." I have the point of view, if a dog can pee in the street, so can my daughter, and nothing happens. But the point is to have it the exception, not the rule.
nice example. Powerful example, then it makes sense. Another word, equality.
Yes, that is a deep one. Comparing things is something that is very difficult. So I'm a mathematician, and there's a whole science behind comparing even mathematical objects, which are, with respect to humans and consciousness, very, very simple. But there's always a question, okay, in what measure? Like, how do we measure distance? And the key with respect to equality is, what are you looking for? For example, equality is very close to fairness. Let's say you have a brother and a sister, and they are treated by their parents in some way. And there's usually this idea of fairness, so I have to treat them equally. And from my point of view, it's completely flawed. Because on the one hand, there is nothing like fairness in the world. So if they get the conception that they have to be treated equally or fairly, they will just be disappointed by later life and triggered that they have a right to get something. But in the end, everybody just creates their own reality in the way that they choose, and nothing is given to you. So from my point of view, if you just see two human beings, and then there's the question of equality, there's, from my point of view, nothing equal about two human beings and nothing even to compare, except the heart, except the core of the being. Because in the end, everybody is an expression of God. Everybody creates his reality, her reality as an expression of God. And therefore, everybody has exactly equal opportunity, exactly equal possibility, exactly equal powers. But the circumstances, the real world circumstances are completely different. Like even if you look at two identical twins, for example, we might assume that they have an equal start or something. And I completely disagree, because they again have different past lives. They again have different, like, let's just say they are sleeping in bed, father, child one, child two, and mother. Then alone through the proximity in sleeping, the one closer to the father will take more out of the thoughts and of the being of the father, and the one closer to the mother will take more of the thoughts and the being of the mother. And therefore they are different. They have a different start, except that they are completely the same, again, as incarnations of God in this reality. So this is what I say to equality. There's no equality except from the core, and this is the most important equality of all.
Fascinating. I'm going to start by saying that everything you said resonated. And I finish by saying that I've not heard equality talked about in that way before. So that's really quite interesting. Another word. Feels good to throw another one in there. Obligation.
Yeah, obligations are an illusion. There are so many levels where we feel obligated. For example, with respect to work. For example, with respect to treating other people. And from my point of view, obligation is a distraction. Obligation is a distraction from expressing your true self. Because if something, some task, something that you can feel obligated to is in line with the expression of your being, it doesn't feel like an obligation. You would never call it that. Like, for example, with the book that I talked about, is it my obligation to write it? Doesn't feel right at all. It's my calling. Is it my duty? No, it's a calling, and it's still a choice. I can still just choose not to do it. I wouldn't, because it just feels stupid. I know that there would be consequences that I don't enjoy, but I'm not following the calling because of fear of consequences, just because it's calling, and I know the joy that will come from following the calling. Children are the closest thing to obligation that I see, in the sense of if you create children in this world, then there is a huge and I can see some obligation of taking care of them in the sense of making sure that they are safe while they explore their lives. But even there, the way how that is realized can be very, very different. I myself am father of 3 children, but I don't live with them, as I don't feel that this is the way how I can express my living, how I can enjoy my life. I take care of them financially, and I'm in contact with them spiritually all the time, and I see them regularly every 2 weeks. And I see how beneficial the new living arrangement is, not only for me as I chose it, but also for them. Because now, like before, I was there all the time, but I was never truly present with them. Or the times when I was completely present with them were rare, because they felt as an obligation at the time. Spending time with them felt as an obligation. I didn't embrace it. Now, whenever I spend time with them, when I spend time with them. And there's no obligation anymore. There's not the feeling of the obligation. Maybe that is an interesting point. If you feel obligated to do something, how are the chances that you're going to do a great job about it? How are the chances that you are going to channel your full consciousness into it because you're standing behind what you're doing? And therefore, I would have the point of view that anything that is done out of obligation is done not as good as it can be, probably badly.
So moving into that thought a bit more, can you identify a point in your life where in which you have acted out of obligation and explore as to how that unfolded?
I have a small example, and maybe a bigger will come through when I talk about that. Until very recently, I had a huge resistance to doing manual chores like cleaning. And whenever I was told that I need to do it, subconsciously I adjusted the program of, yeah, I can do it, I won't enjoy it, and how can I do a bad job? Not not intentionally a bad job. Like this was nothing that was present in my mind. In my mind was more the fear of not being good enough, in the sense of being told off by my girlfriend that it's not clean enough, because she cleans with passion. And if somebody cleans with passion, it gets the different kind of clean if somebody follows a process, which is exactly like at the moment we have somebody who comes every 2 weeks and cleans our flat. And it's never good enough, because they just have a process and they follow it. She is good at what she's doing, and she enjoys what she's doing. But in the end, she has a process of getting through everything in the time that is set for that. And therefore, she's not hunting for dirt. She's going through it. My girlfriend, when she cleans with passion, she's hunting for dirt. That's no obligation of getting something clean. That is a passion for the freshness of something truly clean. So when I'm obligated to clean something and I don't enjoy it, then on the one hand, I'm just waiting for the time to be over, or just following the process to get it over quick. And energetically, it's completely different. You can see in the result that it's done not with passion, but out of obligation. Of course, there's no 3D proof that it's different, because if you swipe a floor, it's swiped. But it's like there's one huge soul was said he recorded a meditation. And at the beginning of the meditation, there was a long silence, 2 minutes of silence to get into that. And after a while, because they wanted to sell the meditation, they decided, well, the silence is a little bit too long. So maybe people get bored with 2 minutes of silence at the start of the guided meditation. So they cut off the first 30 seconds of silence. And then they listened to it. And then they decided, no, something has changed. It was more complete at the beginning. So they just put on 30 seconds of silence at the beginning, but artificial silence, true silence, basically, nothingness. And it was way worse because the first silence was charged. It was charged. It was recorded silence charged with intention. And this is exactly what happens when cleaning with passion. Like there's an energetic cleaning that goes through you, through your intention of cleaning something, and it cleans it on way more levels than the physical level. And this is something that happens when you do something out of obligation. It happens. And one more interesting example that now comes to mind with obligation has to do with Peter Sage. There was a time when I committed myself to being his chief marketing officer. And I organized a lot of stuff for him. I organized, like he was in a difficult situation. He went to prison and came out of prison and had the obligation to create another Sage Business School. But he didn't create it out of obligation. He put in something masterful. And at that time, I decided to become his chief marketing officer. And it was a wonderful learning opportunity for me, because at the beginning I was in it with passion and I worked together with different people. And after a time, it had served its purpose for myself. The sense of the purpose at the beginning was huge, of working through different things, of basically selling my old company. And it's always easier to walk towards something to just walk away without knowing where you walk. So I walked towards that, and it was a huge opportunity for me. But after a while, it had served its purpose for me. But I didn't have like somebody who could take my place. And therefore I continued the job out of obligation. And there were some pieces of brilliance that still came out of that when, like, I remember when I created one marketing email to save the Master's Circle that I created myself without delegating, and it was a beautiful piece of art. It didn't work though, maybe because it was out of obligation. It was a beautiful piece of art, but nobody was called by it. So, and that might also be something. When you're doing something out of obligation, it might just not work. The almost scary thing, if I look at it, is when you look at how the economy is structured, with a lot of people in working relationships where they do not have a passion for what they do, but they do everything out of obligation. It's an interesting question of what might happen if the leaders manage to inspire people to enjoy what they're doing instead of forcing them to do something and tricking them and managing them into doing something instead of inspiring them to fall in love with that work.
Something which jumps out at me when you were talking about the cleaning example, when you said, when you do it with passion, you clean at different levels. You clean at an energetic level as well. And it's kind of, if you look at the great pieces of art, the masterpieces, the sculptures, the paintings, which, you can have something which is technically fantastic, or you can have something which you look at it and makes your heart sing. It's almost like you feel the difference of this imbued passion in something. It speaks at many different levels, and it almost feels like what obligation has the potential to do what obligation has the potential to do is create a situation where we only create within this realm. Whereas when we do something or create something through passion, we create something which is beautiful, not just in this realm, but in many other realms as well. Realms which we may not be able to perceive with the five senses, but we perceive nonetheless in different ways. So it's when we are experiencing something which has been created or executed with absolute passion, it sings to our soul, and it communicates with us at many different levels.
Yes, art is a wonderful example where we're actually able to perceive it. Like cleanliness is also something where we are sometimes able to perceive it in the sense of, but we don't perceive clean. We perceive this room has good energy. We feel well in this room. But art is a more example where you stand in front of something and either it resonates and it pulls you or it doesn't. You call it a masterpiece. And my girlfriend is an artist, and it's very interesting her process. Like many of the most amazing pictures, like the pictures that you really feel, they have many layers underneath. Like she starts with painting a picture, and then at a moment in time, she decides to recreate it in the sense of painting over it, which means everything that has happened before is you cannot see it anymore. But at least from my perspective and perception, it makes a huge difference because energetically something has happened with the picture. There's already gone a lot of intention into it of creating a piece of beauty, and the beauty shines through even if you don't see it with your eyes, but you see it with your being. And this is like, this brings me back to the book. I am not really pissed off that I have to start from scratch because I know on the one hand I couldn't have done it in the first steps, and on the other hand, like, also a book at the end is not the words on the page. As when we are talking, the communication is not only happening through the words, the communication is also happening in between the words, because we are so much more than what we perceive with our senses, with our obvious senses. And there's so much more happening between the two of us and between the two of us and everybody who is listening. And it's not about understanding the word. It's about getting something that is in between the word that might support your growth.
That was fun. I enjoyed that. That might be my favorite word so far. We have another word, and this word is control.
Yes. Control, very similar to equality, has two completely different meanings depending on where you look. Many people have control as a value, I would always say. Not consciously, not chosen, but for example, fear of change has a lot to do with control. The thing is, we are planning for the future. Like ego mind on this reality is planning for the future, and we would like to be able to follow that plan. We would like to control our reality into following that plan, into knowing what is going to happen next. And the problem is, while we're thinking we're doing something that is constructive, controlling our reality and controlling how our reality unfolds, it is actually very limiting. Because from my perspective, we are not the limited being in a body. We are basically God creating a reality. And as God creating a reality, we have the whole universe as our servant. The whole universe is just trying to get us to where we desire to be. And when we control something from our limited mind perspective, the only thing that we can think of is in linear terms. So if we are set out to achieve and receive goal A, and we have a plan how to get there, that plan is always limiting in the sense of it's coming from the mind, it's coming from the linear. When we are now trying to control ourselves to goal A, all we have is the limitations of creating in a limited reality world. The true control does not come from our limited mind. The true control comes from our higher self. The true control comes through our beingness, from our God sense. So what would happen if you have a goal A and you let go of all of expectations how to get there, and you're just present with that goal every day, not having a plan that contains all the steps how to get there, but always just being present with a goal and always asking just the question, okay, what is it that I can do today to get there? And just doing one step at a time, not having any conclusions how you actually will get there. And from my experience, this will create wonders. It might not create wonders in a linear way, because then with what I just said, it can be understood in the way, yeah, that means that goal A is always achieved. No, because that is still in the linear way, in the sense of, okay, I desire that and therefore I need to get there to be successful. But the goal might also be replaced. The goal might be replaced with a bigger goal, or the desire for the goal might just be something that leads me in the direction of the goal. But after 10 meters, while the goal is 100 meters, I might have already got what I needed to get from that goal, and therefore the goal is redundant now. If I stay in the mind and in the plan, and if I am attached to getting to the goal, I will waste my time. And whenever I waste my time in the sense of pursuing something that is not an alignment or an expression of myself anymore, I struggle. So being open to the control of the higher reality leads to a completely different way of living, to a completely different way of enjoying the reality. And wonderfully, this reconnects to the first word that you gave me, change. If you manage to trust in the control of your higher self, change becomes your friend, because it's always a gift. It's always something that is coming from your control through you into this world. And it's always a gift, always a present. This is also why the question always can be very beneficial. Whatever change comes to you, to ask the question, whenever something you perceive as bad or as unpleasant, to ask the question, what gift is in there that I'm refusing to see? And if you ask that question long enough, persistent enough, the gifts will emerge, or the awareness of the gifts will emerge. Because if you believe in the control, if you believe that you control the reality from your higher self, or if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter, because you do. And it's just a question of perception and the question of the willingness to receive the power of your control, the courage to use it, the courage to use your whole being to create from the control outside of this world, instead of controlling your reality for the fear of badness to happen, or the fear of not achieving something that you set out to achieve, for the fear of not being good enough if you don't achieve it.
Wonderful. Good work tying it back to the first word as well. I didn't know if you were going to say, when you do this, you become okay with change and you let go of resistance, and political correctness doesn't mean anything to you, and you fall into a state of equality and you have no obligation. It's like, wow, that's
Well,
impressive.
that always sounded like you designed it that way from the beginning. Like, am I on a quiz basically to get the story that you put in there at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean that would put me in a certain level as a particular interviewer, but I wrote this list in about 30 seconds. So uh, while it'd be nice to say that at one level, there was a definite moment of surrender and just writing whatever came out, and as you said, allowing the higher self to control the
Exactly.
recording of what was
It
happening.
was in the control, but it was not in the control of your mind. It was in the control of your higher self. Beautiful creation.
Gracias. Okay. Next word. Domination.
Yeah. Domination and trust are two words that go completely together with me in me. And trust is something that is very important in this reality. Well, that's bullshit. Trust is lack of self-trust is one of the major wounds that we enter this world with. And as the reality evolves from the inside out, if you have a lack of self-trust, it will realize itself. And it will realize itself by you being dominated. Domination is basically the response of lack of self-trust. And this ties together with the work of Rory Kilmartin on well, the archetypes basically. And then I know he changed his name, but I don't know how the new name is. What the new name is?
Archetypal dynamics.
Archetypal dynamics, exactly. Archetypal dynamics. One of the shadow archetypes in there is the so-called sheep. Somebody who has problems with the boundaries. The wound behind it is self-trust, lack of self-trust. In my sense of telling the story, you do not trust the world, and therefore your trust will be violated. You will create for yourself the trust, the violation of your trust. Therefore, somebody comes to you and he has a desire with respect to you. But as you do not have any boundaries, because you know that it's painful when boundaries are violated, therefore you do not have any, the violation is basically certain, because somebody without boundaries can only be violated. And that is an act of domination. So every violation of a boundary is an act of domination. Are there other acts of domination? I don't think so. So if you consider yourself a sheep, if you resonate with being a sheep, this world example of what to do with it is learn to have healthy boundaries and learn to communicate them, because the big difficulties with having boundaries, like many people say, yeah, now I have boundaries, but people violate me still, people dominate me with respect to my boundaries still. And the question is always, okay, did you communicate the boundaries? Because in your head you already do, because you're thinking about them. But if you do not speak them loud, you're basically asking somebody to read your thoughts, which is possible, but not something that will stop somebody violating you. So therefore, first, have boundaries, communicate boundaries, and then see what happens. And the next thing is, whenever you communicate a boundary with a because, like you cannot come closer to me than this, because then I feel that you are too close and I'm uncomfortable. Whenever you have to put a because after a boundary, it's not a boundary, it's an excuse. Boundaries are, this is true because I say it is true. And there's no explanation needed. Any explanation is just an invitation to argue with the boundary. And the core of a boundary is it's something that you cannot argue with. A boundary is just a no without any further interrogation. Unfortunately, if you keep your wound of lack of trust in yourself, and you manage to have wonderful boundaries, you communicate them well, and you do not tell anybody a because after your boundary, you're still in the game of always having people come at you, trying to dominate you. And now you know how to deal with it, but it's still not fun. At least from my point of view, if somebody tries to dominate me and I have to show a boundary, it doesn't happen in my reality, but it doesn't sound like fun to me. And the key from my perspective is not learning how to deal with it in this reality. It's a good first step, because the healing of self takes time, but the self-trust. How do you embrace self-trust? Just take something that allows you to embrace it. Affirmations might work. Tappings might work. Explorations with a skilled facilitator of where it's coming from might work. But it's usually a wound that happens before you're born, so you cannot mentally go through it. You can still work with traumas from your childhood where self-trust is violated, and by just being present with it, by shining your light through it at this expression of yourself that was traumatic, you heal something of the wound. But in the end, it's just a practice. And if you want an exercise that I would suggest, it's just sit in meditation with a song that you like, probably without your lyrics. It's good if it's 5 to 7 minutes, and basically sit as in meditation. And on each inhale, you just inhale self-trust. How do you do it? By having the intention of it. Like, I trust myself. You can think I trust myself as an affirmation, but the key is the intention of inhaling trust for yourself. And whenever you exhale everything that is out of alignment with it, that is not resonating with it, that is in the way of trusting yourself. How do you do that? By just having the intention of that. So in your head, it just works like, I trust myself. I trust myself. 5 to 7 minutes every day for maybe 3 months. Then stop it, forget about it, and write another 3 months in the future in your calendar, in your just a reminder of check what happened in your life with respect to self-trust and people violating your boundaries. And you might be very surprised of what happens.
Very nice. It's very complete. Nothing to say. Next word. That's what I have to say. Next word. The next word is soul.
So, we are at the moment speaking as incarnate humans. And it's very easy to talk about that because we have a body, we can touch it, we can speak, we know what we're talking about. But that's not all. There's more. But unfortunately, at that moment when we talk about more, it gets a little bit squishy or fishy. So there are different concepts of what more actually means. One thing that is true for me is that the being that we are, the more that not only the body is aware of many lives. So if you want one concept that basically comprises that, like, okay, we are humans, we don't have one life, we have many lives, and we have some kind of remembrance, usually not the actual remembrance, except in trance and stuff, it might happen. Then we use the concept of a soul, of just saying, okay, we are not just one life. From my point of view, that's limiting, because that basically takes a lot of limitations that come from having many lives. Like, okay, I have trauma that was not in this life, that is limiting. I have karma in the sense of I did something bad in another life and therefore I have to suffer in this life, that's limiting. And those concepts, like, they are part of your creation. If you believe they are true, they are true. And if you believe they are not true, they are not true. But from my point of view, it's beneficial not to look too much at the soul perspective. You can still use it as a label, but more into the infinite being perspective. That's just one level on top of soul. Like, yes, I'm not this body. I'm an infinite being. I have no boundaries in the sense of if I close my eyes and if I try to touch the outside of my being, they go further and further and further outside until I reach the outside edges. I can have the experience that they are none. And as an infinite being, I have a completely different perspective. Like, for example, if you argue with somebody, if you have a fight, and after the fight, or on a short break of the fight, you sit down, close your eyes, and say, okay, I'm an infinite being, he's an infinite being. What the fuck are we doing here? It's usually very small or even comical very soon, because as an infinite being, you have a much broader perspective. And a lot of the hassles of daily life are just smaller. But from my point of view, infinite being is still not big enough, because there is another perspective missing. And that perspective is well worded in a book from the guy that also wrote Conversation with God, Neil Walsh,
Walsh.
Neil Donald Walsh. And it's a children's book, and it's about a soul. The Soul and the Sun is the English title, I think, or at least Soul and Sun is in there. And it's about two souls coming together on a different realm, agreeing for the other soul to experience something where he basically needs a devil, where he basically needs somebody to hurt it, except that every soul is light, is good from the core. So if somebody does something bad to you, from the point of the book, that's just a ploy for you to be able to experience that badness. So for example, you can experience being forgiveness. You can experience being the embracing of something that happens to you. And bad is just a judgment. Like, from a little bit of a higher perspective, everything that's happened to us is just an opportunity to create more depth in our being, an opportunity to create more experiencing of experiences. If our life is just happy dandy lying in the sun, it's basically boring. So what we need, what we strive for, are mountains that we can climb. And somebody doing something that is considered painful in the moment can also be considered a mountain and therefore a gift. And one of the core messages of the book is basically yes. And in this two people interaction, this all goes back onto a contract or an agreement on another realm of I do this to you in service to you so that you can receive the gift of being able to grow, of experiencing forgiveness, of whatever the point is of that certain experience. And from my point of view, like this is, the book talks about the soul level. From my point of view, in the infinite being level, this can be included, but it's not automatically included. But what I like to see is that everybody, every incarnate human is God creating their reality. But as everybody is God in the sense of the all, the everything, the thing, the energy, the vastness that creates the reality for everybody at the same time, this necessity that everything that happens is not perfect for the other while somebody suffers, it's always perfect for everybody at the same time because everybody agreed on another level, is from my perspective automatically included in seeing yourself and every other being as God. And not only the humans, like also the animals, also the plants. Everything is God incarnate, radiating through the godliness, and therefore everything that happens cannot be anything other than perfect. And the fact that it happens means that it's perfect for that moment in time. Perfection not as in stillness, as in changelessness, but perfection as in moment of the journey.
Wow. It was quite beautiful, Björn. We move into the 9th word now.
Of course, there are 9 words.
Of course, there are 9 words. How could it be any other way? Love.
Love. Love is a label, and that is difficult. When we are small children, we are taught what love is by people telling us that they love us. And that is a concept that is very, very broken because as children, we are very perceptive. And if we have a mother that loves us on one level, but on the other hand despises us because we are taking so much energy away from her, a mother that loves us, but on the other hand has the idea that she needs to judge us into proper behavior, because judging somebody into proper behavior is a way to induce proper behavior. It is very painful because that way the idea of love, the pure energy of love, gets distorted. And whatever we think after we have grown up what love is usually a combination of things where there is a little bit of the purity of the embracing of the heart, but a lot of stuff that is just entangled with it. Therefore, the word love is difficult. A little bit of like, there is this idea of unfunneling that by putting another adjective before it. Like, okay, there's love and there's unconditional love. But in the end, love that is not unconditional is not love. If you ask me what my definition of love is, then love means taking something as part of yourself. And if you take something as part of yourself from the pure idea, like this is under the idea that you have a proper relationship with yourself, because many people with their self-judgment and self-hate, taking something as part of themselves doesn't mean much, maybe. Taking something as part of yourself in your purest expression of who you are. And in that way, love is that creates. In that way, love is one of the two bases of the universe. If you go on a very woo-woo, if I'm allowed to talk very woo-woo for a moment, as if I didn't already, everything that we experience as reality is created in a way. Like, I'm not saying that reality is real, but reality is a part of consciousness that we experience as real. But still, something needs to create it. Something needs to project it so that we can experience it. And that is projecting reality is love and light. Love as the female principle of radiating energy, and life as light as a masculine principle of radiating energy. As you have with Mother Earth, the love of the mother that allows us to experience our life on this earth, and Father Sky, with the light from the sun that warms us up, that gets us up in the morning, and that gets us to do things. The light that is a presence, and the love that is the embracement of the being that you are. And I'm not saying that love is wrong, especially self-love is another wound of the archetypes, and I won't go into that right now. I'm just saying love is a label, is something, labeling something that I love something is very weak. Feeling the love in your heart is something very strong. And if you don't know how to do that, just ask a question. Like, body, can you show me how love feels in my heart? And then as an exercise, even you don't know what for, but love is always good, probably. Feel the love that you have for yourself in your heart for a moment. Connect yourself with the earth. Put your feet on the earth, connect with the earth. Allow the earth to contribute to you, to show you how to love yourself, and to take something away from you that is in the way of loving yourself. And when you feel the love for yourself together with the love from the earth to yourself, you can feel the warmth. And that is love. And that love can be radiated into your life, into your being, into everybody that you come in contact with. And that changes reality, rather than the label of loving something and the label of loving yourself. Love is a feeling. Love is a beingness that you have in your heart, but a beingness that you can feel, that you can perceive through feeling, that you can radiate out. And even though others might not feel what's happening, they are suddenly drawn to you, and their life might change, because love, the most healing energy that there is, healing the sense of transforming you from where you are to where you desire to be. Healing in the sense of allowing trauma to dissolve, even without reliving it, even without doing any excessive work on it. The love from yourself is something that is so powerful in creating your reality from the trust of being, except instead of the fear of change. And if you master to love yourself strongly, it will also be very easy for you to embrace change, because suddenly you realize that your life just unfolds in a beautiful way.
Wow, that was super beautiful. And that made me vibrate in many different parts of my body as I was listening to you speak. It's a sort of thing I'm going to listen back to many more times. Thank you. That really was quite spectacular. So, we have explored our 9 words, which means we are complete on our list. Is there anything else which is there for you now that you would like to say or share?
No, I feel very empty and fulfilled now.
Excellent. Well, you have another week to fill yourself up until we record again, which is beautiful. Yeah, and I think just my final thing before I close up the call, just to say to be complete is as I said at the start of the call, I really enjoy hearing you when you're in your flow and when it's coming through. And I think you're magnificent today. So wonderful. It was very much a joy to be on this call with you. So for anyone watching or listening, I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today and the new format. We're going to play with formats as we move forward. So perhaps we'll do some more random words, the traditional conversational format we've been doing up until this point. And there's another few sort of structures that I want us to play with to keep it varied and to keep it fun and to keep it lively. If you are watching us on YouTube, then be sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you are listening to us on one of the many podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Kindle, whatever it may be, then again, click to follow us, because we're going to be releasing on a regular basis, as we have been. But we're also going to be putting up different types of content which may come on an ad hoc basis. So it's just good to keep informed. If anything that we've discussed in this conversation, or indeed in any other conversation in the past, you feel will resonate with people that you know, then we would love it if you were to share a link to this with them and introduce them to the conversations that we're having. And also, if you have a suggestion about something for us to explore, something for us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us. We're keen to explore whatever's there for us and there for other people. And you can get in contact with us either by visiting our website, pineal.org. You can reach out to us on email. If you want to contact myself or Björn, it's our first name at pineal.org. And if you want to, you could also find me on Instagram, which is pineal_Nick. And I'm fully engaged on there. So if you inbox me, I'll come back to you relatively soon. So for this call, we are complete. Thank you very, very much for being with us. It's an honor and it's very humbling that you are. We love you all in the sense that Björn just described love. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.